Welcome in, Falcons fans. Your boy Bryce Lewis back at it again for more Atlanta Falcons content. And today we have a special guest on the show today, former Atlanta Falcons quarterback and current Atlanta Falcons broadcaster, Dave Archer. You may also hear him on the radio from time to time. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, Bryce. Good to be with you, bud.
Yes, sir. Glad to have you on, man. And last time you were actually on the show, we were talking about Desmond Ridder and if he was going to work and things of that nature. Now, fast forward a year later, he's no longer on the team, and we have a new quarterback, Kirk Cousins. It was when we made the signing in free agency, I feel like a lot of fans were kind of mixed on the decision just because of money coming off the Achilles, age are the main things, playoff record. But I just want to get to my first question. My first question to you is, what did you think of the signing? And as a former quarterback, what do you think of Kirk Cousins' game coming to Atlanta?
Yeah, first of all, best available guy for what they want to do offensively, Bryce, was Kirk Cousins. When you began to break down what it is Zach Robinson's going to bring offensively to this team and how it blends with the talent they have and then the talent they since have acquired, you begin to see it kind of take shape. But it's a quarterback that's been very accomplished over his 12 years in the National Football League. He's a guy that's played in this system both in Washington and Minnesota. They're both those areas are disciples of the Shanahan/McVay type system. So that all blended together. So where do you go to find a guy that can be the trigger guy that you have in place? And Kirk Cousins was the logical decision. I know there's some more athletic guys out there. There's younger guys out there. But when you start thinking about this roster that's under their current setup, where guys are in their contracts, it's a win now type situation. You're not looking to get a young guy to come in here. And at some point you will, but a young guy to come in here and kind of develop with that. We did that last year, right? We're hoping that a guy developed. It didn't happen. So Mr. Blank said, hey, do what you've got to do. I know money's going to be a premium here to go get a guy like this. Go ahead and spend that money. Let's go find a guy that can help us win right now. And I think that's what they did. Best available guy to come in and fit what they were going to do.
And I completely agree with you there, Dave. I think that was what the move was. This was a win now. We are trying to get to the Super Bowl these next couple of years. I think people look at this window, especially because of the contract construction of Kurt, as a 2-year, maybe 3-year window. And so they felt like this was the best move to get him there. Kurt, before he was hurt, was playing really, really well for Minnesota. So it's not like we got a quarterback we already saw declining before he came here. He just had an injury. And we'll have to see how he comes back from the injury. And that actually goes to my next question, like you mentioned with the young quarterback. Do you see the Falcons maybe in this draft, later rounds, potentially looking at getting a guy that they can play 2-3 years down the road?
Yeah, I don't know if I would do that. I think you kind of experimented that with a 3rd-round pick in Desmond Ridder. Not saying you can't find guys. I mean, obviously Russell Wilson, and obviously the logical one is Tom Brady and Joe Montana. There's been guys that have been great players in this league that have been drafted later than the 1st round or the 2nd round. But I think in this scenario, I think that you're probably looking, if you're going to go find a guy that's potentially going to be your franchise guy, and here we are talking about potential franchise guy, and the guy we just hired to come in here was a 4th-round draft pick, and he was the afterthought, right? RG3 was the quarterback that was supposed to be that quarterback on that Washington team, and here comes Kirk Cousins out of Michigan State in the 4th round, and now here he is as this guy that's coming in hopefully to save your franchise. So not saying they wouldn't do that. Is there a Brock Purdy sitting out there potentially that you could go get in the 6th, 7th round, 5th round? Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility. But I think they got to continue to find guys that can play for this team. And namely on the defensive side of the football, this has been kind of a flip from last year, right, Bryce? You looked at last year and you addressed free agency with the defensive side of the football, right? Jesse Bates and Davon Yamadas and Caden Ellis, those guys all come in to try to bolster the defense, and we attack the offense in the draft and or with some guys that we'd already drafted previous that were still young players. This has been the exact opposite this year. Now here come all the guys on this offensive side of the football with the quarterback and some receivers, and now it looks like maybe they'll attack the defense with the draft. And there's some pretty good players that could affect this team in the first 3 rounds, but not saying they wouldn't take quarterback potentially later on in the draft.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it's going to be just a question because, we get involved in the draft process. Well, next year's QB class isn't as good and we get into all of that. But at the end of the day, they got to do what they feel like is best and what they feel like that can project for certain players that they like in terms of what they want to do and what they project for the team moving forward. But speaking of the offense, like you said, they've been very heavy offense. They acquired Darnell Mooney in free agency. They traded Desmond Ridder to the Arizona Cardinals for Rondale Moore. Two guys who are very quick, 4.3, 4.2 speed. That's something that maybe under Arthur Smith, the team has lacked. Deep play, big play offense, big play receivers. Drake London is considered more of a possession route runner receiver. So they added speed. And now that you've added Kirk Cousins, who just came from having a Justin Jefferson and a Jordan Addison, is that kind of like potentially showing that they're probably going to want this offense to be a much more big play offense potentially?
Well, I think it certainly builds in that possibility, Bryce. I think that when you begin to look at the two guys you just mentioned, Mooney and Rondale Moore, they're guys that can blow the top off the coverage, certainly, especially Mooney. Mooney can go get it. He's got deep speed. He tracks the ball extremely well. He's got great hand-eye coordination. He's got great route integrity for a guy that has great speed. Sometimes the speed guys don't run the best routes. He really runs really good routes, which magnifies the problem he presents as a DB. Not only is the guy closing the cushion and getting up on me, he's running at angles that I can't mirror because I can't run as fast as he can. Those are the kind of things he does. But they also are short space guys, right? You're talking about bubble screens, jet sweeps guys, shallow drag guys that you can get the ball to on the move. And that lends itself to what you're talking about is big plays, because I don't care how the big play comes. If I throw a swing route to Bijan Robinson and he takes it 60, I'm good with that, And if I can hit Darnell Mooney on a crossing route, a 5-6 yard throw, and he turns it into a 45, 50-yard play, then that benefits me. But what you're alluding to is correct in the fact that it's tough in this league to go 12 to 14 plays and score. That's what the defense wants you to do. They want to try to bog you down at some point in a 12 to 14 play drive because they know you're going to make a mistake at some point. Somebody's going to jump offside. Somebody's going to get a holding penalty. And now you're behind the chains and you can't get a first down. You have to settle for 3, or you're not even in field goal range. Whereas if I'm scoring in 5 or 6 plays on offense, now I create major problems defensively. They've got to cut down on the big plays. So now all of a sudden, as a defense, I've got guys that can stretch the defense. Well, that pushes those corners and safeties deeper into the secondary, creates bigger creases for Kyle Pitts and for Drake London to also contribute in that big play category, because a 15, 20-yard play, that's 2 first downs. All of a sudden, Kyle catches a crossing route for that deep over route for 20, 25. I just got a big chunk play on that, and it's not one of these smaller guys that we brought in. So their effect on what we do and how we deploy can really affect how a defense's mindset goes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something that with Zach Robinson coming in as new offensive coordinator, we're imagining we're going to see some similar offense to what they did in LA with the Rams. And, they know about Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua and what they did. So I can definitely see the vision and what that type of mismatches and advantages that could create for the offense. But now transitioning to the defense, like you said, it looks like they're going to focus defense in the draft. I know some fans are, and obviously we still have time. There's not a rush to sign people. People are a little like, why haven't we tried, or why haven't we added a defensive player yet? Obviously, biggest holes people think of is defensive end, probably opposite AJ Terrell and opposite Jesse Bates. Is there any particular player, just starting with free agency first, that you know of that maybe you wouldn't mind the team taking a look at potentially, or a certain position you'd like them to address maybe before draft?
Well, certainly some of the guys that we had last year that are free agents, whether it's Calais Campbell. Calais had kind of a rejuvenation type year. Was he and Bud Dupree? Bud Dupree would be another one, the guy that would shared the lead in sacks, 6.5 sacks between those two veterans apiece. The leadership they bring to the table. That defense, for the most part, played at a pretty high level. There were some moments late in games that left you scratching your head a little bit about the defense as to why they couldn't get some stops. But predominantly, the defense played at a pretty high level. We're ranked in the top 10 a good bit of the year prior to the late in the season as being one of those defenses that was fairly formidable, especially on third down, getting you off the field, those kind of things. So some of those guys you certainly would look at trying to add. I don't know what that number is. And again, you start talking about restructuring contracts, or whether it's Grady Jarrett's contract or Jake Matthews' contract, some of these guys that have a little bit bigger dollar value attached to them, to where you can retain a couple of these veterans on a 1-year deal or something like that. And then there's some intriguing guys that might be available. Now, being an employee of the Falcons, it precludes me from being able to mention names of guys that are under contract under other teams. But there are some guys that have been named, and I think everybody's following this team pretty closely, this is a pretty hardened fan base here in Atlanta. They know the names that are out there that potentially could be trade material. There is some of that still in the offing, but then you begin to point towards late April and what the draft looks like, and some of the guys that are at some of the impactful positions. There's 2 or 3 guys that'll be available at 8 that could affect the edge rush. There's no question about that. If there's, at least 3 guys that I can think of off the top of my head that would be guys. There's a guy at Alabama, there's a guy at Florida State, there's a guy at UCLA that all can rush the passer in different capacities and help defend in the run game. If you're looking at corner, there's 2 or 3 corners that are high-level guys, the team with A.J. Terrell at the corner spot. So, but I think a lot of people would like to see that fire breather coming off the edge. I think that's what the Atlanta fan wants the most. They want someone that can come off the edge like John Abraham and go get the quarterback.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the one key thing that a lot of people feel like is missing from this defense. Now, overall, last year, this team had one of their best sack seasons in the last few years, even without the elite pass rusher, but they had guys who contributed. And obviously, they're switching to a 3-4 this year. That means, things are going to change a little bit with Leak as the defensive coordinator. Obviously, some people are wondering, is the personnel correct right now for what they want to run? And will that potentially affect the draft pick potentially, So I guess my question to you is, what did you think of the change philosophy-wise to the 3-4? And do you think that they're going to have to change people or change this roster defensively a little bit? Or do you think they can kind of run what they have with personnel-wise and then just have to add a couple of guys here and there?
Yeah, it's a good question in that the philosophy thing becomes an interesting conversation because this era of football is kind of an adapt to your personnel type era, but it's also we like to label defenses, and most defenses are like amoebas. They morph to whatever you need them to be based on personnel that's on the field. So the old 3-4-4-3 concept really doesn't apply. It's more of a hybrid, and they've kind of blended together where you've got an edge rusher that can stand up on the edge if you're in a 4-down line situation and is big enough to defend the run, but he's also sleek enough and can get after the passer, and they can still kind of slide into kind of some 3-4 concepts. I think that's the only thing that this team's lacking from a 3-4 guy would be a nose tackle type player, a player that's 330, 340 pounds, a Vita Vea type player like they play in Tampa. And those guys don't just grow on trees. Those big dudes that are nimble enough to be effective against the run game and still give you some interior pass rush. But I think that because defenses in college are a little bit like the NFL now, are a little bit hybrid style offense or defenses, they're going to be able to find guys to fit, and they have guys already on the roster that will fit the quote unquote 3-4. Because remember, Bryce, 62 to 65% of the time you're in a sub package anyway, and that means nickel. So if I'm in a nickel situation, I've got more pass rushers on the field anyway. I got lighter guys on the edge. And offenses are trying to morph to that. They're trying to get you. That's what this offense that Zach Robinson is going to run with 11 personnel, which is 1 back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers. They're going to try to get you to go to a sub package where you got 5, maybe 6 defensive backs on the field and a little bit lighter guys up front to rush the passer. And now I got Tyler Algier and I've got Bijan Robinson coming downhill at you in the run game because you got lighter guys on the field and you can't defend. I got a Charlie Warner who we just acquired in free agency as a tight end from San Francisco, come off the ball and block you and get you blocked. And now all of a sudden we're into that second level with the run game, because that's the part that's being forgotten about this team. This team can run the football. This offensive line has run the ball really well the last 2 years. So that's another element to add to what Zach Robinson can do on the offensive side. But getting back to defense, I think it's such a hybrid style now defensively that I think you're going to be able to find people. The only person you don't have is that gigantic guy in the interior. And there are some guys available in the draft that could fill that need.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with that. I think that alignment, figuring out who you're going to bring in, like you mentioned earlier, Calais Campbell, we'll see if he comes back to the team and where he'll play. I know Grady getting back from his injury, we'll see where he plays. It feels like, those 3 guys, if they came back, would play, but we'll have to see. And like you said, they adjust. They may not always do 3-4. They may occasionally do some 4-3. So it just really depends on what's happening in the scheme coming forward. But my last question for you, sir, before I let you go, Falcons hired Raheem Morris this offseason. Terry's still here. And I just want to get your thoughts on the hire. were you a fan of it? Obviously, Raheem's been here before. He's had a couple of stints here in Atlanta. And just, your overall perception of just what their vision here is for this team, obviously.
Yeah, I really like the hire of Raheem Morris. I think he understands the city, he understands the team. He was here as an assistant back when this team went to a Super Bowl, so he's seen it the highest of heights. He's also seen what we had to do when we had to change staffs, and he was the interim head coach. So he's felt it. He knows Mr. Blank, and he knows the commitment of Mr. Blank. He's a high energy guy. He's a very positive dude. I think that guys nowadays, the negative energy that berating guys and trying to get guys motivated in that capacity, that doesn't work anymore, Bryce. I think that you got to work from a positivity standpoint, and Raheem is the highest possible. Now, he'll be real with you. He's not going to, blow smoke up your rear end and tell you how great you are if you're not getting it done. But he also is going to work from a positive frame and then go back and say, okay, but let's get this fixed. Let's do this, this, and this. I think that energy that permeates he and the guys that he's brought in will be something with a young football team that is kind of migrating towards that positive reinforcement as opposed to negative reinforcement. I think they'll gravitate to that. That'll be something they'll cling to and they'll hang on to. But at some point you got to go play and win, and you got to take care of business. And I think his X's and O's, his studying both sides of the ball. Remember, he was a wide receiver coach here. He was a DB coach here. He was a defensive coordinator here. I mean, this guy's got a versatility to him from a head coach standpoint where he's going to be able to walk into an offensive meeting room with Zach Robinson, and they're going to be able to sit down and talk toe-to-toe and talk about offensive football and deploying guys and all that. And he's going to be able to go to the defensive meeting room and sit down with Jimmy Lake, and he's going to say, hey, this is what we need to do here. I love that about the head coach. We've had so many coaches that have been kind of mired to one side or the other. Raheem's ability to go back and forth and understand what they're doing and be able to put the game plan together from a totality standpoint, I think is really cool. I love Rod being here, and I love his energy.
Yeah, definitely. And I was a big fan of the hire too. I think he brings it's a person that you're familiar with. Excited to be here. You can tell that in his press conference. Excited to be here, and it seems like him and Terry seem to have a very strong relationship right out the gate. And so we'll see as they continue to enact their vision amongst this team on the team, what that turns into, and then the success once they play football once September rolls around. But Dave, I appreciate you coming on, man. Appreciate you taking time out to talk some Falcons with me, man. Let people know where they can find you.
Dude, I always love coming on with you. I don't do a lot of the social media stuff, but at Archer QB16, if you want to hit me up, you want to ask me a question or tell me how wrong I am, because we can do that too. But I'd love to communicate with the Falcon fans. Have been phenomenal. Love talking to my fellow Falcon fans because I'm a fan too. I played here and all that kind of stuff, but hey, I'm living and dying just like y'all are. And keep listening to Bryce, man. He's breaking it down for y'all.
I appreciate that, Dave. And like I said, guys, we'll have to see what happens as we get closer to the draft, and we'll see if the Falcons make any more moves in free agency as well. But that's all we got here. It's your boy, Bryce Lewis. See you next time.